has been a fun thing with this. It's like you don't always get to do something like that, a visual arc, sort of show how it's evolving. And from the beginning, we had talked about, Fisk and Matt, they're both wrestling with this alternate, this other ego, this other identity. And the use of color within lighting and the use of specific types of lighting throughout that arc shows kind of where their character's catching up with them and when it does. And so for Fisk, that blinking white light that's in that initial sequence in the pilot, juxtaposition, like intercut with Matt with the blinking red light on the other side, it's just like a reminder that their identity is really kind of always with them and coming through. It's teeing up where their story will go and where they've come from. When he's fully brought himself back and he's on the Daredevil side of the world, it's just gone to that place. Yeah, I love these demons that they're both wrestling with that are very much them.
Hi, I'm Gordon Burkell from Filmmaker U. At Filmmaker U, we create courses for film professionals to deepen and diversify your existing skill set. You can learn more at filmmakeru.com or, of course, follow us on Instagram at filmmaker_u. Every week, we interview a film professional to discuss their work, and this week, I'm joined by cinematographer Hillary Fyfe Spera, whose work includes Dexter: New Blood, The Flight Attendant, and most recently, Daredevil: Born Again. Welcome to the show.
Thank you so much. Happy to be here.
I talked to the production designer, and one of my first questions for them was the opening episode, the whole fight going all the way up the stairs and out the top, because I wanted to know like what was on set, what was in location, and so it seemed like it was a mix. And I'm wondering how you set up to shoot that.
Yeah, well, Michael Shaw, the production designer, who's a really close collaborator, and we've had a really great experience working together on the show. And so all of it, from the ground up comes from that collaboration, not just with Michael, but with Phil Silvera as our stunt coordinator, the directors, of course, the performers, the actors, and lighting, camera, everybody. And it's really an all hands-on collaborative effort to do something like that. I mean, that oneer was pretty extensive, and we stitched together practical location and the stage, the set that Michael had designed, which was the rooftop. And it's funny because the stairwell was practical, even though it could have sort of been a set because it was so small and cramped. But we shot on location, and it was attached to the bar location that it began. So it was definitely a feat for everyone to sort of put, all their sort of mind and focus onto that. And also, shot over multiple days. And so we did a lot of rehearsing. We did a lot of pre-visualization. And then, we pre-lit it. And then once we were there, I think we did, can't remember how many takes we did for the first section, but it wasn't a tremendous amount. Like Phil really was dialed in terms of the choreography. The performers were incredible. We had our lighting cues on point, and it just was like, okay, all systems go. The stairwell was physically the hardest section because we had an operator walking backwards upstairs and operating that all in one go. And we had lighting cues attached to that when they blow out the lights. That was all practical, the sparks. And then to continue it to the rooftop was all obviously one camera move. And so it's just, it's a combination of continuing the look across the different environments and the choreography, the movement, also the lensing it had to be exactly the same. It was all on the same lens length. And so we were just, it should have all felt like one continuous move. Like the directors described it as a relentless camera. I think they called it like the tracks of fate, meaning that it was just sort of like observing this event, and sort of had no hand in controlling it. It was just there to witness. And so I thought it was an interesting approach of a oneer in a way that sort of was like just there bearing witness of like sort of events unfolding. So
I've been a camera person for 30 years, and I fell in love with cinema. I heard there was free film school in France, and I wanted to get into the French film school. I really didn't know anything at the time, but I knew at least how to take pictures. So I said, I'll try for the image department. And then when I miraculously got into the French film school, I fell in love with working with the camera. You're following what's going to be in the movie. So that immediacy that the camera allows is what I loved from the beginning. I'm Kirsten Johnson, and this is my course about documentary cinematography.
Forgive me, but it's been a long time since I've shot something, and last time I shot something cinematography wise was on film. And back then, going from inside to outside and back was really you had to decide what to lose basically. Like, are we going to blow out the sky? Are we going to keep it dark? So now with digital, do you still have those? Because you go outside, but it's on a stage. But like there's going from the bar into the back room, then back out, then into the stairwell, and they all have different lighting. So what was there give and take in there? Like how did that work for you?
Yeah, so the bar and going outside of the bar was all practical. That was all in location. And we were controlling it with lighting, and we had lights on cues that would sort of dim or rise depending on what we needed them to do. Obviously, yeah, you're exactly right. On digital, it's a little easier. We can control aperture a bit more. What we're seeing is what we're getting for the most part, so it's easier to monitor. But it's all part of the planning, you know. I mean, I miss the film days. I did a lot of projects on film as well. And it just, it's a different approach, obviously, but I love those sort of creative challenges of going into it and knowing like we're going to have to figure this out. And maybe we have to start with a deeper stop in order to open up at certain moments and sort of, it's all part of the dance, it's part of the
Mhm.
choreography. Um, yeah, which is a really fun aspect to it.
The one thing I don't miss about the film days is waiting for it to be developed because I was always like, did I mess up?
I
Is there a
know.
mistake I'm going to discover tomorrow?
Yeah, yeah. You're sort of like biting your nails until you get the negatives back. Yeah, I still shoot still film. I still shoot on film
Yeah.
and for stills, and it's the same thing, And I shoot reversal too, which is like you have very little leeway to to screw up. So it's
Yeah.
worth it when it works out. It feels good. Yeah.
A similar discussion we had with the production designer was making Fisk look bigger and more domineering in his space, and that was dealing with sort of the way they design things to make him look larger. W- Did you guys do something similar with the camera and choice of lenses to try and make him look different and larger?
Yeah, we sure did, and it's great because that's yet another collaboration with design. You have to sort of all have to be on the same page in order to pull it off. And so yeah, and speaking with Michael, they built the sets a certain way, and we knew we were always going to be low beneath him, so we're always going to lens him from like a sort of lower than eye line angle and use wider lenses closer up to sort of feel his presence and his imposing. And Vincent's a big guy. I think he's six
Hmm.
four. I mean, he brings that type of imposing stature anyway, but we were all intending. And so when we were talking about design and stuff like that for sets, knowing that we have to go low angle and look up into the ceiling is a really important element. We have to sort of talk about that. And it's also like, always showing him from sort of that like lower, wider, closer point of view also gives us the ability to show the other people in the scene from maybe a higher angle, make them feel smaller. And so it was all part of the discussion of like, how are we going to use the camera to pull this off and what we needed to know. And the other really big element to Fisk's storyline is the use of white. Like that's really his color. And it's sort of this like oppressive white, and we use it a lot with lighting, but also, it's in his wardrobe, it's in the design. And when it's in the design, it should be used kind of sparingly or intentionally. So it's all a conversation. And I feel like when we're all in conversation together, it ends up on screen and you can really see it. It's all blending. And that intentionality is just such a critical part of cinematography, obviously. And for me, just in terms of telling the character's story and kind of where they're coming from and where they're going and using that as part of the arc too.
Well, and part of what's interesting is in the arc, and maybe I'm mistaken, but it seems like there's a lighting change over the series. And what if there is one, what is it like? What were the plans behind that?
Yeah, so that's a really has been a fun thing with this. It's like you don't always get to do something like that, a visual arc, sort of show how it's evolving. And from the beginning, we had talked about, Fisk and Matt, they're both wrestling with this alternate, this other ego, this other identity.
Mhm.
And the use of color within lighting and the use of specific types of lighting throughout that arc shows kind of where they're characters catching up with them and when it does. And so for Fisk, that blinking white light that's in that initial sequence in the pilot, juxtaposition, like intercut with Matt with the blinking red light on the other side, is just like a reminder that their identity is really kind of always with them and coming through. And we knew we were going to get there. We knew Matt was going to put on the suit again. We knew that Fisk was going to become Kingpin again. And so for us visually, the intention of showing that, the conversation with Fisk specifically was like, he's the institution. He's just going to adopt that even more. And he's going to become, it's his city. And so we talked about kind of that like Godfather lighting, like intentionally kind of lighting him from harder light from above or from below, like something that really just makes him feel imposing and iconic. And it was fun to just kind of like go for it with that, and have the
Yeah.
freedom to go really cinematic, iconic, comic book at times. Like the cool thing about our show, I think, is that, it has these moments of naturalism for sure. It's very grounded and human. It's about the people, but then it goes full comic at moments too. And I think you've earned both. Like they're in the same conversation. And so finding ways and when to do that was part of that visual arc. And towards the end, I think we go more into that side of the spectrum. And it's kind of, it's teeing up where their story will go and where they've come from. And in Matt and Daredevil's side of the story, same, he's lit with a lot of reds and a lot of warmer light, often with a handheld camera as opposed to Fisk, which is very locked down in studio mode. And so we're just, when he's fully brought himself back and he's on the Daredevil side of the world, it's just gone to that place. There's a lot more red light, there's a lot more movement. And yeah, I love these demons that they're both wrestling with that are very much them, so
And how intertwined they are. Like
totally.
they exist for each other almost.
Absolutely. And I think that Charlie and Vincent would talk about that. They're two sides of the same coin in a lot of ways, and they're kind of that iconic, almost mythic duality. And, even scenes like the diner scene where they're very infrequently in the same shot in the same scene, and being able to see them both there. And Matt is shot with a handheld camera on his side of the coverage, and Fisk is shot with a dolly in studio mode on his side, and it's just like the worlds kind of melding. And
Hmm.
it was fun to conceive sort of when that meld happened and be very intentional about it. And I really love like a visual thesis and sticking to it. Of course, break the rules as soon as you can, whenever you can, but like just setting out with that thesis is like, it's just such an exciting thing to be able to do. And not often can you really like stay true to it. So.
Now you referenced the comic, like a comic booky look at one point, but what I found really interesting is when I see the way New York looks in this, it reminds me of the old Daredevil comics in the sense that not that it looks like a comic book, but in the sense that there's like a grittiness to it or a feel to it. I don't know how to like I've never seen New York that way, but it was always what I remember it from comic books and movies and stuff. So I'm wondering like how did you approach the city and sort of giving us this unique city that doesn't exist in the real world at the moment?
Yeah, it's really true, actually. It's like, it's funny. We shot in New York on the street, and it's making New York feel like what you think of New York
Yeah.
sometimes, that memory. So it's like, it's capturing a nostalgia, but also a reality. And I think that that was the fine line that we walked. And, I've been in New York since 2003. So I guess that makes me a New Yorker. I don't know when that line is crossed, but my favorite films are films of the 70s in New York. I just feel like that's like the iconic version of New York in my head. And, you know,
Mhm.
it's lived through so many eras as a city. There's remnants of all of that, but you're exactly right, have to kind of mine it out as to like choosing where you shoot to represent that and certain blocks and certain angles, of course, and times of day. And one way that we really, I feel like captured that or worked hard to capture that was just the use of a lot of like steam sources, smoke, wet downs, just making it feel more textured and kind of
Mhm.
grimy, but in a beautiful way. Like I love all those sort of like the beauty in the mundane or in the sort of just like everyday. And I think that, we have a lot of B-roll or essentially A-roll, shots on the street that just were as presented, but we had to curate it and really be looking for the thing that fit both the book version of Hell's Kitchen and Daredevil story, but also like this version of New York that we're showing. Just the funny thing is though, is it's paralleling so much of current day, with the story of Fisk and the story of Daredevil, like just sort of it's eerie, sort of as we were making the show, like how New York was becoming the New York of our memories and sort of the world of our memories. And yeah, it's an interesting parallel.
Curious about creating high-quality YouTube videos? Enroll in video editing and production classes at Manhattan Edit Workshop to sharpen your skills and turn a hobby into a career. Start your journey to becoming a pro today.
Well, I remember going to Hell's Kitchen for the first time because I stayed in the area and I was like, yeah, I'm gonna go to Hell's Kitchen. And then I got there, I was like, this doesn't look anything
Yeah.
like I expected it to.
Yeah, I think they talk about that. It's funny, it's in the script. It's like, there's a lot of delis now and the diners are gone. And yeah, Hell's Kitchen is like one of the iconic neighborhoods of New York. And it's like,
Yeah.
it's definitely different, but you can find it. Like those dark corners exist for sure. And it's still there.
Because you said, you really like the 60s and 70s movies. What is your go-to? What is the one that you enjoy the most?
Well, it's funny for this show, French Connection is our absolute North Star. It's funny. I was thinking of that film just as I was interviewing for the show, like before I was even really truly on it. It just really jumped out as something that was very on the street, very open to the elements, about character. Certainly had like the adventure aspects of it, the thriller aspect of it, but it's just, it just felt like very much in the DNA and in the vein of some of the scripts and the story. Clute's another big one for me. Conversation. We use a lot of like 70s style zooms, like long zooms, and that film's a big one. There's a film called Thief, which is actually Chicago in the 80s, but I still think there's like a real tone to that film in our show. And also just photographers like Saul Leader
Mhm.
and Robert Frank, just people who are just on the streets in the city. And it's all kind of in there. And I also just, realized recently that making the show now after being in New York for 20 years is different than if I had first arrived. And so I think just the time spent in the city and sort of just observing it as a person who lives here is a big part of my attachment to this story as well.
How do you think you would have shot it when you first got there?
Interesting. I feel like I would have been more without, sometimes I feel like cinematography is either within or without. And I feel this one, I feel very within. Like I can like taste it and smell it and hear it and feel it. And I think when I first got here, everything was new. My eyes were super wide. And I think I would have been on the outside looking in more so than I am now.
Hmm, interesting. Now, there are a lot of layers in this show. And I mean, like, Muse has his space, Daredevil has his space, Punisher has his space. What was your approach to lighting them each and
Yeah,
creating unique looks?
totally. Yeah, no, it's interesting. There's a lot of different that was totally intentional as well. Like we tried to give each storyline kind of its own thing, but have it all feel like it's within the same conversation. So, Punisher, when he entered, it was like, okay, his world is a lot more chaotic and like, there's just a lot that we were kind of doing subtly within camera and lensing to kind of represent that. Um, Muse, it's funny, Muse's storyline was one that was parallel in a lot of ways, but also he was such a unique individual that we were trying to find ways that like folded it in. When they clash, and their parallels were the parallel also to Fisk and Adam's
Hmm.
story and moment. It's just like it was cool to just talk about that and be intentional about how that, and it was all within the fight choreography and the lighting as well, but just finding ways to kind of like blend them but also give them individuality at the same time. And the same goes for some of the women in our show, Vanessa's story, Heather's story. They're all kind of treated individually. It was important to me that they all had their own identity, but still, again, have it be the same, have it be congruent in terms of look.
Is there a particular scene that you're most proud of in the series, the way you lit it?
Oh, it's so interesting. I really love the there's a lot. I think Charlie Grubbs, our gaffer, is incredibly talented. He's an artist, and same with Matt Staples, our key grip, and they brought so much to the table. Our collaborators are everything, for me at least. That filmmaker family is the way that all of this happens. But I really love the initial sequence that just juxtaposes Fisk and Daredevil, just as they go through that initial sequence in the pilot where they're
Hmm.
both coming to their character, and Matt's walking through a crowd of people and the red light kind of grows on him, and the same with Fisk with the white light. I really loved that challenge. Fisk was standing on a hotel balcony about 40 floors up when we did that, and Charlie was on the street in New York, through a crowd of people, and it was just like, it was very in the elements, and it was very uniquely challenging. So I'm
Yeah.
proud of it.
I
Yeah.
have one last question for you. What would you say is your favorite guilty pleasure film or TV show to watch?
So funny. This is totally out of nowhere. We really like, my boyfriend and I really like Below Deck.
Oh yeah, that's a great
Yeah.
one.
We have a little boat in Brooklyn, and it's just been like a total guilty pleasure, that show. Not cinematic, but
No, it's my wife and I watch a lot of reality shows just to
yeah.
unwind, right?
Yeah. But there's a lot of stuff. There's a lot of more cinematic stuff. I really like documentaries too. I'm a big
Yeah.
fan of Nasals, and I think documentaries are actually my true guilty pleasure. I love them. So, yeah.
Any documentaries stick out that people should check out?
Oh God, there's so many. Why do people always draw blanks when you ask for specific projects? Yeah. Give Me Shelter. There's one. There's an amazing one. Oh, actually, Last Waltz is one of my favorites too. I really tend to like music docs and biographies. So yeah.
Have you seen Finders Keepers?
No.
It starts off and you're like, oh, this is going to be very like a joke sort of laugh. And then it sort of gets into why the people have ended up where they are. And it's very interesting.
Wow. Oh my gosh. Yeah, I would love that. Yeah, I used to make a lot of documentaries. It's sort of where, definitely a heart is for me. So it's I enjoy watching them and sort of getting out of the narrative world for a minute.
Well, thank you so much for letting me interview you today.
Thank you so much, Gordon. It's a pleasure. I really appreciate it.
And that's it for this week, everyone. Make sure to check us out at filmmakeru.com and, of course, on Instagram at filmmaker_u. I'm Gordon Burkell. Thanks for watching.